Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. Jim Brett here at the New England Council. And I hope everyone's summer is off to a great start. I know if you're in Boston today, it is gorgeous. It is a 10 today. It is absolutely magnificent. While we do anticipate a slightly lighter event schedule during the summer months, so many of you, I'm sure, will be taking a much needed vacation time. We do have a few other events coming up. Next week on June 30th, we'll host the third event in our Investing in Infrastructure series. This time looking at probably the most difficult part of the infrastructure legislation, finance. How do we finance the much needed upgrades to our regions and our nation's infrastructure? And then we'll be followed by an event, our fourth event of the series during the week of July 12th, where we'll explore the innovations in infrastructure with broadband and telecommunication technology. And we're also working on additional virtual Capitol Hill reports for the month of July. And hopefully, and I mean hopefully, we can soon begin to have live events with our good friends from Capitol Hill. Today, for our first Capitol Hill report of the summer, we're pleased to welcome a great friend to the New England Council and someone who I have personally called a friend for many years, and that is the Honorable Congressman Bill Keating. As many of you know, the Congressman and I served together in the Massachusetts House of Representatives back in the 1980s. He went on to serve in the state Senate and then as the Norfolk District Attorney before being elected to the United States Congress in 2010. Over the past decade, he truly has established himself as a leader on Capitol Hill on a variety of important issues, not only for our region, but for our nation. As a current member of the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee and a former member of the Homeland Security Committee, he is one of the House's foremost experts on matters of national security. His district boundary touches more ocean water than land. So it's no wonder he is the champion of the blue economy in Massachusetts, which includes a variety of marine-related industries, ranging from underwater robotics to offshore wind. All are thriving in his district, thanks in large part to his leadership and his support for this ever-growing sector of our economy. This is another very busy time in Washington as lawmakers are contemplating at least a half a dozen measures this week, while they're also looking to forge ahead soon on an infrastructure package. And the annual appropriation process is not too far off, if I'm not mistaken. So we are truly fortunate that the Congressman could join us this morning to provide us an update on the latest activities on Capitol Hill. Please join me in welcoming my good friend, the Honorable United States Representative, Bill Keating.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. It's great to be with everyone, at least virtually. But it's Jim and I were speaking just before we went on the air, I guess. We were saying the one thing you miss with these in-person events that we're so used to, so much of the work got done as you're having coffee before the event occurred, or as you're having a little breakout conversations afterwards. I just look back at my meetings, Jim, with the council, and I'd run into someone there, they'd introduce themselves, they would say, oh, I'm interested in this. And I said, so am I. And there's something in our district that, we can help with, or something in DC that we can try and encourage for growth of this particular business or industry. And that's what we miss. And I know with the New England Council, that's one of the rare things. It's a huge organization covering a great geographic area and a great expanse of issues. But those side conversations, the interpersonal meetings. So I hope you get to the stage. I hope we all get to the stage that during the summer and after, some of those can occur, because I look forward to that part of the meeting as much as anything else. So I'm glad people are healthy. I'm glad we're making progress with vaccines. We have challenges ahead, but I just welcome everyone and look forward to meeting again in person. I think you're muted, Jim.
Speaking of getting back to normal, when do you think you, Capitol Hill, we'll be getting back to normal. Well, we'll have visitors coming in to see your staff, see you.
Well, I'm glad you qualified that, because if you just said, I wonder when Capitol Hill will get back to normal, that's a harder answer.
Yeah.
But now that you qualified it in terms of getting back to normal with visitors, we're following the attending physician's instructions. So we're not doctors here, although a lot of members are doctors. Some of them don't believe in evolution, so I don't know if I'd go for them for treatment, but we have the attending physician, and that's what's guiding us here in the Capitol and in the House in particular. So we're rolling in our staff. They're here as I'm speaking here in DC, and in the district offices, we're rolling that back into a place. There's a thorny issue too about the vaccination issues, and so many of your businesses that are listening right now have the same problem. So what do you do on the vaccination issue? Are we going to have cards that are official? They're already counterfeit cards if you go on the internet being put out there. How do you do it? If you have a restaurant, God, if you have a cruise line, it would ruin your business. So we're in the same boat. We're in the people business, but not as acute in terms of the impact as some of the businesses out there. So that's going to be an ongoing problem as to see what goes forward. I think when the emergency status on the vaccines is taken away, there's going to be an opportunity and a lot more legal, red lines to navigate within. For instance, you'd be surprised, our armed services, about 30% of our military aren't vaccinated. Now, this is crazy. My brother was in the Navy. He just calls me and said, how can that be? They used to tell us just line up, bend over, or open your sleeve, and this is it. But because it's still experimental in its designation, they can't force people to do that. Once that changes, that'll change the outcome. So we're really there. I put a lot of money that we had in technology right in the beginning, over a year ago for our district offices in particular. So when people called the district office, they wouldn't know the difference. And we had meetings. So we function well, but it's happening. We're walking around here now. Masks are discretionary. Here in the Capitol, the vaccination rate's over 80% for members and staff. So we're getting back to normal. I'm in the district. This past weekend, I was all over the place. And I must tell you, it was so great to be out there again.
So what's on the calendar in the next couple of weeks for you and for your colleagues?
We're getting a lot done in the House. Anyone that knew Speaker Pelosi before or afterwards, I was warned when I got in here, if we ever get in the majority again, you better buckle down, because she will take that opportunity and work us to death. So we've been very productive with bills. The number of bills leaving the House have been extraordinary. And some of the bills that don't receive attention, like the ones we're working on this week with agriculture and with financial services and energy and commerce, some of those bills are very important bills going through, but they're going through on suspension because they're not controversial. We've worked out the differences ahead of time in a bipartisan way. When people look at Congress, they forget the fact that we suspend the rules on the things we agree ahead of time. And all they'll see is the controversy, because that's all that's left when we're debating things or when we have impasses. So we're doing a lot of work in the House, getting a great deal done. Unfortunately, the pattern since I went here, they just go to the Senate and languish, and nothing happens. And then maybe at the end, they'll bunch a couple of bills together at a time and deal with it. That part's very frustrating. So we have been busy in the things that don't make the newspaper necessarily, but might make trade publications and professional publications, because they have impact there. The big issues, infrastructure, probably first and foremost. We're at an unusual window of opportunity right now to deal with infrastructure, one that comes across maybe every decade or two. I mean, we're now rated C-, I think, by an impartial group of civil engineers in our country. We have bridges that are falling apart, roads that are crumbling. We're not doing broadband. We're not keeping up with the new infrastructures that will bring the economy forward the way some countries in Europe are doing, or China is doing right now. And we're falling behind. So this is our opportunity to spring ahead. And so the discussions on the infrastructure bill, what you see distilled from TV or any kind of commentators broadcast, oh, can they get together? I would say this, just being around here, get together about what? That's the key. About what? Is the test that we can just get together on anything? That's just not going to cut it for this opportunity we have right now. And the Biden administration knows that, and Joe Biden knows it because he's been around a long time in Capitol Hill. So the filibuster, which is just so undemocratic and has been used not as advertised generationally. It used to be the deliberative, seasoned, wise Senate. They'll act slowly so that we're on a steady course. And the filibuster, which was introduced to thwart civil rights legislation, has been perverted into dysfunction. The main item of dysfunction here. Any senator, and they may not want to give up this personal power, and that's another issue that people don't focus. A lot of these senators don't want to give up the personal power of walking down to the chamber, putting a card in and stopping everything from happening virtually, because to get to 60 is so hard. And that has to change. And we're not going to have, it's dysfunctional enough. And I think we've talked before at other sessions how that's the case. But this instrument is truly the primary tool of dysfunction. And that's whether the Democrats are in power or the Republicans. We may not get what we want if we're Democrats, without not being able to thwart things with a 60% rule. But historically, if you go back to the Federalist Papers, there was a decision to make it not a supermajority, but a majority rule. And now that's not the case. So we're working hard, but the infrastructure debate is one that, with polling in the public and what the Biden administration's put forward for a plan, it's getting like unheard of popular support, like 78, approaching 80% support. And people understand what infrastructure is. It's not so that polling's significant. So my hope is that we'll move. Now, here, if I can take a couple of minutes to try and just lay out to make things more understandable. Right. It's happening, I think, on three levels. You hear the discussions about bipartisan infrastructure meetings that are occurring, and that's great. The president's opened the door in the White House to those. The latest count has about 11 Republicans maybe coming in and out for some of those discussions. But they don't, when it gets to the point of funding this, it falls apart every time. And they still have to go back, even if they come together on something, to Mitch McConnell, and they still won't have the 60 votes. Even they just won't have those. So I'm very concerned about that going forward. The second approach, the second tier, I think, would be the president trying to get what he can in a bipartisan way, fund it the best he can, and get a portion of what he wants. And I don't think that's going to cut it with Democrats. Mm-hmm. The third, which is interesting, and not to put words in the speaker's mouth, but my own observations, I'll call it that, is a hybrid, maybe where the president gets this bipartisan group, gets what they can, and then we do whatever we can through reconciliation process, where you won't need the percentage. I guess a fourth one would be just everything breaks down, but we're still going to go forward with reconciliation. That's sort of the default approach. All these things are happening at the same time. For instance, in the House, we're going ahead with the Budget Committee, which is the first step for reconciliation. And we're going to have, John Yarmouth, from Kentucky, who chairs that, going forward with that, beginning, I think, this month or this coming 4 weeks. So we're going ahead. It's sort of like the scene out of Dr. Doolittle with the negotiations, trust everyone but cut the cards. We've learned the lesson that you don't put all your eggs in one basket here. And then when it falls apart, you're left with nothing. And the time and the clock is, run out on you. We're dealing it all of those ways at the same time. And for the people listening, you don't usually hear that, on the cable shows or in the news shows. So I just thought I'd give my perspective on that because I think it's one that is what reflects what's really happening behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. You said the House Budget Chair is pursuing a reconciliation package. Are we talking
the
about?
First step is to get the budget in order. That's the first step in the whole process.
I mean, is he talking the way Senator Bernie Sanders is talking, the chair of the Senate budget, $6 trillion package?
No, that's not happening because it's not possible. You can't tie that much to, I don't believe, the budget. There's restrictions, and see, that's why the bipartisan approach is better. It can be broader. It can hit different areas that both sides, I think, agree have to be dealt with, and it can be more robust. If we go through reconciliation, people have to understand this, that it's limited, and we really don't know. We'd be testing the limits, and there's a Senate parliamentarian that'll be sitting in judgment of all this, saying this is in, this is out, this is in, and this is out. It's not ideal. And that's why it's sort of the default mechanism. But to fail at this time really endangers our economy. Our economy, number one, before the pandemic, was much more fragile than people realized. And I think a lot of your members know that. There's a lot of warning signals on many fronts. I mean, we were lagging in trained and educated personnel for the new jobs and the new industries. And I know this from my own region. Yeah, as you mentioned, the blue economy. That's going to explode. The marine, renewable, blue economy is exploding. The projections are in the next 15 years, that's going to grow at double the average expansion. Now, is it going to grow in Europe? Is it going to grow in China? Or is it going to grow here? And I'm particularly sensitive because even the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, we were in Woods Hole just in the last 10 days together, I believe. And we were talking, and she paraphrased what I've been saying for years, even to the council when I addressed them. The southeastern portion there, the Cape and South Coast in particular, is going to be the Silicon Valley, or could be the Silicon Valley of this exploding blue economy, because it's got the research institutes, Woods Hole, it's got UMass, the Science Marine Technology Center at UMass located in that area. It's got the one of the two top marine engineering schools in Mass Maritime there. And it has private sector businesses there, Hydroid and other companies that are doing underwater unmanned vehicles, and the research that's being done on the biotech and defense side in these areas is critical too. I mean, we're talking about the DoD budget after I get off this call, and we've had hearings with the Navy. They're looking for big increases in a kind of a tighter budget that the president put in on defense on marine related technology. I mean, this is where there's going to be huge growth. And if we don't deal with that with this infrastructure plan, we're going to jeopardize ourselves. That's just one sector that I'm talking about. So we think we're so modern in the US, we're not. We've lagged behind. And it's not about crumbling bridges and roads alone. It's about expanding broadband, making it faster. It's about putting money into what the United States does best. In the whole world, we're known as the best at research and development. That's our best suit. And we haven't been putting the money into that that's going to drive the economy forward. So we have to look forward in this infrastructure bill and not just settle for getting, something done to fix roads and bridges and then say, oh, isn't it great? We work together. Work together. Here's my question. Doing what?
Mhm. Just staying on the infrastructure, if the president indicated in his American Jobs Plan, it was 2.2 trillion. Republicans in the Senate, as well as the Democrats in the Senate working together, put together a trillion. Now, it goes back to your thesis about what does it really mean, roads and bridges and maybe something on broadband. But if they were able to get 60 votes in the Senate and it came back to you to say, hey, this is the first bite of the apple on infrastructure. It may not be what you want in there, but would you be willing to support it?
Well, I think that's the plan that I talked about with my own opinion, that hybrid, where we support it, get what we can,
Right.
but then go with reconciliation
Okay.
to move us forward. So I think
Yeah.
that can be done. I'm always pretty candid when I have these meetings with the council. I still have this concern, and it's a political concern. And I've seen it. I saw it with the COVID, rescue plan, where we didn't garner one Republican vote in the House and Senate. That's astounding for when you consider what was in that and how important that was at a time of crisis. But there's this attitude that Mitch McConnell gave at the beginning of the Obama administration that I'm afraid he still feels now, that he doesn't want to give Biden a victory because it'll become a political success. It's wildly popular what we're doing. And the Democrats will run on that, saying, look what we've done. And he wants desperately to keep to get back to the majority, which in the off-term elections usually happens. So I'm afraid that kind of craven and narrow and frankly unpatriotic viewpoint of moving our country forward could take hold in the Senate. Now, whether enough senators break away and do it, I haven't seen it happen. I've seen a few, but not enough, and that's a fear I have. I don't hope for that. I'm not criticizing it. It hasn't happened on this issue yet, but I've seen it happen time and time again since I've been here, and that really is disheartening to anyone that you take these jobs to try and do something. At least I do.
Right.
I mean, we're all on this earth for so long, right? And no one's, remember the fact that you just have a title next to your name. That'll be like one line on your obituary. You want to do something while you're here to move us forward. And I served with a lot of people that felt that way on both sides of the aisle since I've been here. And sadly, a lot of the Republicans that felt that way that I served with left. And they left on their own. They weren't defeated. They just threw their hands up and left. And I think that has hurt.
Are you open to a different form of financing this infrastructure package?
Well, I'm open to anything, almost anything that will get the job done. Because it's, this is a multiplier. If there's anything that's a revenue multiplier, when we score these things and people say, well, this is how much it's going to cost, and the Congressional Budget Office says, well, this is how much we're going to get back. They don't score everything that does, but there's nothing that's a greater multiplier than putting money into these kind of infrastructure, projects. It pays for itself 4 or 5. And one of the things that Biden put in that Bush did earlier, he put an enormous amount of money into tax credits. So on the public side, you're doing one thing, the things the public does well, and the things the private side doesn't do. But what you're doing is you're leveraging the private side. And there's an enormous amount of private money sitting in the sidelines right now. And if the thing that would move so much of that right now would be not just tax credits, but tax credits that reach out a few years so that there's less uncertainty about investing capital in this and then having it cut off. So if we move forward, which I hope we do in so many areas, with tax credits to help fund some of these things. Do it so that people investing that capital will feel more assured that they can get the job done and it's there with their overall financing. But that's a part of this too. We could leverage a lot of that money and do a lot of these things on the private side. We could also do what we have to do on the public side that'll have a spin-off effect. But here's the key question too, Jim, that we don't ask ourselves. What's the cost of not doing this now? There's not enough discussion, I don't think, on what happens not doing this. We're not in a great trajectory, if we're in a trajectory at all, with a lot of our competition. And production chains, other things are, have to be addressed. We found that out through COVID. So there's a huge cost, a greater cost in not acting.
Going back to your hybrid idea, what if they came to a conclusion on the first phase of the infrastructure bill? We can't come to a consensus on the financing. Let's just borrow the first phase of the infrastructure. Would you be bothered by that? Just add to the debt to pay for the first?
Well, not for the entire amount. I mean,
No,
for portions, of it that makes sense. I think the things where there's great spinoff and the research and development side, you get great payoffs from that. And you're leveraging the private side. On a lot of the research and development funding, you're also leveraging there, not even without the tax credits. So yes, I think, that's part of it. I honestly think that what Biden did initially, I think that tax cut that came through, that now to pay back is over $2 trillion. And now the facts are in for a couple of years plus, that's not paying for itself the way it was advertised. There was no pay for those cuts so that it came back. Frankly, there was no hearing on the bill. And even the Republicans in the Senate and the Ways and Means Committee didn't even get a briefing of it before it came out. And yet there it was, and it has really hurt our economy, not helped it. Because if that money was put into, some of that money was put into infrastructure, that would pay for it. And we're not seeing the benefits of that. We're not seeing, it's wildly at the top for corporations, and many of the corporations bought their own stock back and didn't invest it. When you and I were younger, I guess, and there was political efforts to deal with the economy, they would give companies, whether, for instance, the automakers or something, breaks and capital, but they would take that and put it directly into investment. In this tax plan, they didn't do that. They didn't do that. They did a little perhaps, but the bulk of it didn't go that way. So Biden tried to take some of that wasn't working and use that for infrastructure that would have that payback as a stimulus. So I liked what he did in the beginning. I think he was honest to here's what I want to spend, here's what it pays for. We're not there, but we can't go the Republican route of saying, well, we'll do what the gas tax costs us, or we'll tax electric cars, which is counterproductive and doesn't do the job, or we'll just hope that it pays for itself. I mean, we have to incorporate the price tag is so great, but ironically, it's the same price tag as that which I call failed tax bill.
A couple of your colleagues on the Democratic side from New York, New Jersey, California, they said that they're not going to vote for this infrastructure bill if they don't address repealing that $10,000 cap on the deduction of the state and local taxes. What are you hearing on that? I mean, you cannot afford to have a few defections that could imperil the infrastructure bill.
Look, as a congressperson from Massachusetts, the so-called SALT change that was in that tax bill to help fund it, where, we have a income tax in Massachusetts and people pay into that. And our property taxes are pretty high. But that goes to fund local government, education, fire, police, basics that are there. And we do that better than other states. If we go to other states in the country, they don't fund their schools, the police, or fire the way we do. And that's a good thing, I think. Yet we're penalized now where you're cut off at $10,000 with your deduction when it would be much more. So I understand, and I support repealing that SALT limitation, state and local government limitation in taxes. However, there's a bigger picture. As I started out, that window of opportunity for a massive infrastructure bill doesn't come across our desk, but once every 10 to 20 years. And so there's things I would love to have and would think, and I'll lobby and put coalitions together, but I don't agree with the technique of hostage taking in these things. And no one could, coming from my area, and the property taxes and a lot of things in my district and what's going on, I certainly would support what they're doing in terms of a coalition. I don't support hostage politics, on something so important as a massive infrastructure bill. And by the way, if it's a good bill that's coming forward, I can't speak for those people. They'll be really hard pressed to take that threat and go to the finish line with it.
Maybe they could raise the cap rather than repeal it.
Yeah, there's options. If they need those votes, they can do some things that mitigate the effect of it and not get the whole loaf.
Yeah, exactly. We have a couple of questions here from a few of our members. Can you please discuss the National Defense Authorization Act, the timing for committee action, and your priorities for this year's bill?
Well, the NDAA won't be done. It's when the new administration comes in, quite often, they have to do their own budgets. They're starting from scratch, so that we're not going to do it until the beginning of September. That's clear, and that's already been articulated by Adam Smith, the chair, and we all understand that. So we're in a situation where we're having hearings. I mentioned to you right after this meeting that we're having on the DoD budget. We've already had all the branches in for their budgets. We know where we're going. I mean, it's the one surefire bill that passes every year and has for, over 20 years. So it's like that never stops. The things that we were talking about last year, some of them will be carried over. But this is, again, a period of great transformation for our military. We have, just like the infrastructure has aged, our defense capabilities are aging. Other countries, even with less resources, China and Russia in particular, are modernizing their security and defense. We are in the process of doing it, but we've got to accelerate that in terms of the area they're catching up to us on, our competitors, the technological side. So we need that research investment. I mentioned to you about the Navy budget and how much they should put into, marine, research and development, how important that is. We just had in Cape Cod, Joint Base Cape Cod, there's now a portion of that. It used to be Air Force Station Cape Cod. Now it's Space Force Cape Cod. And so, and I think only California, there's only about 2 or 3 states that have a space center now. And that is indicative of where we're going. So much of our defense now and our infrastructure are very fragile because they're satellite oriented. Now, they're going to be looking at 30,000 objects in space at the Space Center alone. But we're so vulnerable, as are our adversaries. But it's really a 3-country race in space at this point. It's China, Russia, US. And there's a mutual deterrence there because all of us can attack each other and our capabilities in space. And all of us face defense areas where it's, we're not where we'd all like to be. But there's kind of a deterrence because if they do it to us, we're going to do it back to them. And then it's a loss. But when you're looking at cyber attacks. You're looking at how dependent we are on space and satellites for our ground mission. You know, I've been at Joint Base Cape Cod. Part of their function was to monitor what's going on the ground. I've actually been there years ago when I first got elected, where I would see them monitoring actual ground activities in Afghanistan live time from that base. And they would be able to say, hey, you're in danger. There's a troop movement here. There's a terrorist movement there. We're monitoring the nuclear sites around the world in case there's any breach of that and they get in the wrong hands. All these things are based on satellites and technology. And we have to move. So with the NDAA, we have to continue investing in this. We also have to, I think, look at what's not working, and we're not doing well enough on that. You know, there's some among us that want to expand our nuclear capabilities even more. I mean, to me, the maintenance cost of that, the development, the fact that we already have deterrence. We don't need a whole new realm of nuclear weapons that are called low level, and low level by their standard is enough bigger than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that's low level. So we're working to try and make sure we're not spending as much, because we have to pay for these things. And that's a struggle that's ongoing. Locally, we're working, and my local priorities include like Woods Hole, making sure, and some of the people on this call I know are working on this. We're working on the infrastructure of Woods Hole, because that's so important to us in terms of research and science. And if we don't act on this, it's going to be under the sea level. And it was great to see Secretary Raimondo say she is wholly supportive of investments in Woods Hole, in our region, and incorporating what she knows as former governor. URI is one of the centers too, University of Rhode Island. So that cluster, including what I mentioned, and University of Rhode Island, that's a huge center. And she's going to, as the Secretary of Commerce, she's going to be pushing grants in that area. And we're so lucky, Jim. As you know, no matter how you and I change, we'll always be Boston or we'll always be Massachusetts.
Right.
But think about this. We have the Secretary of Commerce now, who knows our region and the Rhode Island region, knows the importance of the investment in this blue economy. And part of this is training and development. And we have a labor secretary now, Secretary Marty Walsh, who understands the same thing. In fact, as you know, he summers in the Cape. He knows the Cape. He knows, you know, he just doesn't know Boston. He knows Massachusetts. And he's tremendously supportive of apprenticeship and getting education and training that doesn't require a 4-year degree to meet these good paying jobs, because we can invest all we want on capital infrastructure. If we don't have a trained, educated workforce, we're not going to be successful. So in the NDAA, a lot of the things that are interest to me go to this training, go to this blue economy, and deal with it. I also, the chairmanship I have in foreign affairs deals with global energy issues, global environmental issues, and those energy issues have an impact, as well as climate change. People can debate climate change, as we do quite often in a lot of these talk shows and things. But when it comes to our military, they don't debate it. They accept it. They know it. It's part of their security plan. So it's kind of interesting, all the controversy around climate change. When it comes to our military, they don't debate this. They are acting on it, and they realize it's a huge factor in our readiness. These storms, all the meteorological, that's all satellite controlled in terms of our ability to do it. And if we're dealing with Navy, Air Force, other kind of things, we have to know what's going on that front too. So the areas I'm concerned with the NDAA have a local significance because of that expansion of Joint Base Cape Cod and their capabilities, as well as investment in SMAS and in UMass and Woods Hole in research and development. That's good for our state. It's actually good for Rhode Island too, if we can do that cluster. So I look at our security, of course I do, especially in my dual capacity in those committees. but I also focus on our security as it affects our economy here in Massachusetts. And there's a great opportunity to expand that.
Mhm. You already touched on this, the Space Force installation. Somebody here wanted to just give you a compliment. You worked on this and you were there to officially rename that base on June 11th. He just wanted to know what it means for Massachusetts. Obviously, you already touched on what it means to the country, but what does it mean for the Commonwealth here?
Well, aside from what I said, look at our other institutions, MIT, all our great colleges. One of the things when we're lobbying for instance, when I tried to lobby and was successful at getting investment at Joint Base Cape Cod in terms of making it the pilot program for redundancy and security on their energy. They're now virtually energy secure. If they're hit, the grid goes down, they have something else. If they have something, that's the pilot. That's for us private investment too. Same thing with the Space Force Cape Cod. Having us right there is going to be critical. But one of the reasons we're able to be as successful getting the investments in our area is the great institutions we have. And that includes all those great institutions of learning in the Boston area. So Massachusetts, just the way they've been successful in the biotech front, we're becoming much more successful in investment in security, research, and development that'll help our environment and dealing with climate change, but also funded and necessary for our security. So it's a great way to look at it. I'm glad the question came up because it really focuses on what we have here in Massachusetts for opportunities. And I just mentioned, it doesn't hurt to have Secretary of Commerce and Secretary of Labor knowing our region so well.
Yeah. You have probably one of the most beautiful districts in the United States. When you think of, Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard and Cape Cod, they come from all over the world to spend their dollars and relaxation and meals and entertainment. Talk about what the summer looks like. I'm told restaurants have the signs that we have here in Boston and other parts of New England. Help wanted, help wanted. How are you doing on getting the seasonal visas, and how are you addressing the shortage of help down the Cape?
Yeah, I mean, if you drive by, even if you go over the Sagamore Bridge, as I did yesterday, and you look at the Christmas tree shop, there's a gigantic sign there, now hiring. I mean, that's big because everyone's going over the bridge, but you could go to any store, restaurant, store, it's all now hiring, now hiring. We're having last year, even in COVID, there was a great influx to Cape Cod. People wanted to get away. They wanted to be outdoors. It was a place where they could feel some freedom. And in fact, the National Seashore had more visitors last year than the Grand Canyon. And so it's really a destination place to begin with. COVID made it more attractive. And now coming out of this, it's even more attractive. And rooms, I was told by the chamber, like almost all the rooms and houses were all booked in March. And there's an enormous influx of people, that's the good news side of the story in terms of tourism. Bad news is our historic difficulty in having seasonal, because it is a seasonal spike, personnel to do the wait staff, the kitchen work, the hospitality work, the clean, and a lot of the retail work. We're always hard pressed for that. And I'm working hard with Marty Walsh and this administration to do better with the H-2B issue going forward. They increased it 60,000 over the cap. We're filling those things now even because we're expecting the economy to push later into the late summer, fall. And we're going to need people. So even though we're a little slow getting that started, there are 60,000 more. I worked even with the administration looked at the triangle countries to try and help those countries' economy to stop the migration to the wall. And so, Guatemala is one of those countries. I talked to the ambassador. We're working individually to see if we can get some of those people targeted from Guatemala into our region in particular, and have a more seamless to get those workers away from other parts of the country and into our area. So we're also seeing younger people. I don't know what the legal limit is off the top of my head, but we're seeing more high school students get involved in jobs that didn't have them before. They're trying everything, but there's not enough. And so you might see some curtailing of hours at some of the restaurants. You might see instances where you do see instances where the owners, and it's all hands on deck and no days off, which you can't sustain with a workforce either. But we J1 visas used to supplement this. That's those State Department visas that are wildly successful for bringing people, usually people that are going to be journalists or activists back in their own countries. They're here to be here for a while, and they work these jobs as they're young, and they go away with a favorable, up to 80% favorability of the U.S. going back to their own countries and having been here. And those jobs, because of the COVID issue in those countries, aren't being filled. So we're trying to open those up too. But particularly, on the islands, a lot of those J1 visas are filled with people that work. So we have a real problem. People are managing as best they can. But it's just an indication. And the real estate, we haven't even talked about that. The real estate prices are through the roof. And that's caused a problem. I was in Brewster yesterday morning for a dedication of housing units that we have there, and breaking ground on that. And the housing situation just makes it more difficult to have local there as part of the workforce. So we're struggling with that. I guess you could say it's a pleasant problem because of success, but it nonetheless, it's a problem. And we can do better, and I think we will. But we just need some help on those visas to reflect the seasonal work, and some of the telelearning that we learned during this period, and some of the programs that are now being pushed by the administration for younger people to have new careers, and adjustment. We're now facing a time in our history where people are going to be changing their jobs more often. And we've seen this with COVID. That's part of the whole equation. And we're going to have a training and education system that's not just there for young people, that's there for people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or more, where they're going to get the training they need. So, but we can, with telecommunications, with greater technology, with greater broadband, we can do some of these things. And that's the investment that brings us back to infrastructure and why that's so important.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of infrastructure, last month, a major piece of infrastructure, the Colonial Pipeline, was compromised in this cybersecurity attack that, needless to say, impacted the gasoline supplies, retail prices up and down the East Coast. They say the origin had occurred somewhere inside Russia, and perhaps with the knowledge of the Russian government. In fact, last week, I remember the president met with Premier Putin and detailed a list of 16 critical areas of infrastructure he considered off limits to cyber attacks. Some of your Republican colleagues say that the president should not have limited to only 16 areas. It should have called for a complete end to all cyber attacks. First, what do you think of this issue, in the sense, do you think you're going to see more of this occur from Russia, regardless of what the president asked?
Well, there's no perhaps. Putin knew about it. When it comes to Putin, he knew about it. It wouldn't exist without. And they're not targeting any Russian-speaking targets at all. So there's no coincidence to that. The threats exist outside Russia too. China. I mean, we're inundated with threats. It could be people, that are non-governmental actors dealing with it, and they're marketing it more, which is a problem with the ransom side of this. These companies are saying, we can get you the money. We're the conduit for it. You pay us a certain amount of money or a percentage afterwards too, and we'll do it for you. So it's a problem. I think Biden addressed it directly and made no bones about it, made it red lines. The more specific you are with Putin, the better. So when he took 16 categories, he took those 16 saying, you cross this line, there will be a response. If you said any cyber attack, it waters it down, because then all of a sudden, you're not going to strike back with sanctions or other means on every cyber. Because first of all, you don't know where they're all coming from for sure. This is sort of like a forensic exam or investigation that occurs. We're able to find out with great certainty on many of these things where they're coming from, particularly the fingerprint of Russia and the black market kind of businesses that they run like this. And the issue is putting it in a plate and then acting. So I think he was smart to take those areas, saying, there's no question we're going to do it here. Now, we could do it with sanctions, and we could be offensive. We have probably the greatest offensive capability in the world if we want to fight back and knock out their infrastructure. The trouble is, it sets just a upward scale lose-lose situation where you're then going back and forth like a cyber war. So that's a problem. The other problem is when you use those offensive techniques, part of the problem is your adversary will analyze those and take defensive actions. So you're giving up your secrets when you do it, and you don't want to do that either. So the sanctions, I think, must be targeted. In fact, in the whole area of Russia, I have legislation that will be going through in the next few weeks called the Crook Act.
Yeah.
But it deals with kleptocracies in this world. It's a very important piece of legislation. And we started a kleptocracy, it's a tough one, anti-kleptocracy caucus that I co-chair. But we're focusing on, in terms of Russia, those rich oligarchs that support Putin. That's where he gets his support from. It's not a it's not a democracy in Russia. So it's supported by a group. It's like a mafia more than a government, where these rich oligarchs support him. He gets his cut out of it. He's reputed to be the richest man in the world, and we're striking directly at that. That's his source of power. That's what he understands. So that's important as well. And that legislation and what the Biden administration is doing to attack that infrastructure is critical, because that's what funds a lot of these cyber attacks and these criminal activities. And it's also a threat to our security, as we've seen on something as important as our Colonial Pipe.
Right. We got 30 seconds left. Can you just give us a quick update on the Steamship Authority down there in Hyannis?
Steamship Authority was a target of a ransom attack. They didn't pay any ransom.
Right.
When they got the attack, it didn't affect navigation. That's the most important thing. So it was safe. It did affect reservations and some of the credit card exchanges that are there. The way cyber attacks are affecting credit cards with our financial institutions. So good news is we came out. The other thing is, just to leave you with a thought, there will have to be changes on the cyber issue domestically and through the corporations globally. There will have to be some mandates on cooperation reporting and getting it back. And that is necessary to defend it, everything. So those discussions are going on right now too. And that's going to be part of shoring up our defense of this.
You got an awful lot on your plate. I know you have a meeting coming up now, the Armed Service Committee, with Secretary of Defense, as well as the chair of the Joint Chiefs, who happens to be a Massachusetts person. So another connection. General Milley, a Winchester native, and
his predecessor, General Dumford, a Marshfield resident.
A Marshfield, now Marshfield, that's right. So all roads lead to the Commonwealth. But I just want to thank you. We have so many other questions, but this is what we miss about the in-person, because you would be staying after our allotted time to answer everyone's question. But because it's Zoom and because of your schedule, it's been very, very tight, but very informative. You got a lot on your plate. We thank you for all your great service, and we'll look forward to seeing you in person sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, stay safe and healthy and enjoy the beautiful weather when you do come home on the weekend.
Thank you, and thank the council. You know, as we discuss these issues, the input from the private sector on so many of these issues is so important. And if we really want to effectuate change here in our country, and you do it here in our part of the country, but I think the private side has to get in and be more aggressive themselves to get things done, because obviously these stalemates aren't working. So thank you, Jim.
Great,
I hope
thank
I see
you.
you down the Cape this summer.
Okay, thank you, Congressman.